Lift committer, and I've been working on a plugin or I should say module, for the past several months called LiftNG, and I'm trying to make a quick screencast here to introduce it to everybody. It's partly a practice run for a talk I'm doing soon, and also I think it'd just be cool to show people how powerful it is. And it's meant to be very fast because I know everybody's busy. If you're a developer, you've got stuff to do. So it's not meant to be thorough as much as it is to be quick and just kind of give you the gist of it. So the more you know about Lift and the more you know about Angular already, the more this is going to make sense. And it's also some of a response to my buddy Amos King, who's noticed that there's always these blog posts about how to use a functional programming language to sort a list in 15 minutes and things like that. And he's like, well, why can't we build an application in 15 minutes? And I kind of took that as a challenge. And so I was like, okay, let's build a chat application, 15 minutes with LiftNG. Let's go. And so I'm going to try to do that here. I'll take several minutes to explain what I'm going to do first, and then I will use my iPhone here to keep up with the time and see if we can actually pull this off as a 15-minute demo. I've practiced it a few times, and I've gotten close. I hadn't nailed it yet, but we'll see if I can do it this time and hopefully not make mistakes like I did last time. And also, if you did tune in last time, you know my headphones died, even though I charged them all last night, so we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen again. But anyway, you guys are interested in seeing what's up at LiftNG, I'm sure, so I'll quit talking about all of that and see if I can jump over to a quick little overview of what's going on. So I'm calling this a 15-minute chat with LiftNG. It'll take us longer than 15 minutes to make the video, but that's just because what I really mean is that the chat application will be built in 15 minutes. I already introduced myself, Joe Barnes. Follow me on Twitter at Joski. Also got a blog, and just a little bit about me so you kind of get a little context where I'm coming from. I've done Java for almost a decade, and so I tend to use Scala like a better Java. So I like to learn to be a more functional programming, and I started Scala late in 2012. It's part of the first edition of Martin Odersky's Coursera course, and I discovered LiftNG in October 2013. Been doing Lift for a while, and we actually were writing Scala at Mentor Graphics where I work in my day job, and using Lift, and started writing an application because I've always been a big fan of Lift, and since learning Scala, and we found out that the front end stuff was pretty complicated and we needed some help, and so we thought, well, we need something like Angular. Let's try that out. Let's see if anybody's done anything with Lift and Angular. And it just so happened a guy named Doug Roper had just put together some stuff, and it's perfect timing, and he made it open source. I took it and extracted it to the module that it is today, and I've been working on it ever since. And as a result of that work and just my enthusiasm for Lift, I was invited to be a committer this past July, and it's been a lot of fun. So what is LiftNG? Well, that's a good question. I like to say built upon Lift, LiftNG is the most powerful, most secure AngularJS backend available today. Now you're probably thinking that's a pretty bold claim, but I stole it. Stole it directly from Lift, because we like to say that Lift is the most powerful, most secure web framework available today. So I should back that up a little bit, and we'll talk about what Lift is briefly. Obviously, it's a web framework. Security is a big deal for us. We like to make that up right up front and try to be as secure as possible, because developers don't like to think about security. We like to just build applications, and so out of the box, Lift will safeguard you against some 6 of the OWASP vulnerabilities, and or of the top 10, and by default it'll do those things, and you basically have to put in effort to be less secure. Which is usually the opposite of what you might experience in other frameworks. And it's the other thing I love about it is it's designer friendly, and because the HTML is done by view first style, the templates that you use are not like servlet pages and things where it's kind of half HTML, half logic, and kind of difficult to decide what should go there. Well, it's just HTML, and it's real clean. And also Lift has some very outstanding comment and AJAX support, which makes it a really killer backend for anything you're doing on your browser. And the interesting point is that this is Scala's oldest web framework. It goes all the way back to February 2007, and I know David and other folks that have been associated with Lift have been instrumental in a lot of Scala adoption throughout the early times of Scala's endeavor into becoming a more mainstream language, and so it's got a really cool kind of history in the ecosystem. And finally, I like to say it doesn't hide web development from you, and this is a thing I point out a lot to people that I really like about Lift is it just lets you sling HTML, JavaScript, and CSS and kind of stays out of your way. It doesn't feel very heavy. But the problem is you put a lot of stuff out there, you might be using jQuery and so forth, and we all know how frustrating that can be. But fortunately, we have Angular, which is a front-end framework, and it extends HTML vocabulary for dynamic web apps, and it gives you these really nice declarative DOM manipulation um, types of functionality. And it's also test first, which is I really like about Angular. And so if you've read any of the documentation, every time they explain a feature, they usually very quickly explain also how to test it. In this demo, I'm going to skip all that, of course, because I want to get it done in 15 minutes. But we could certainly have done some testing and made a legitimate application that way. There's lots of powerful magic. Obviously, it's not magic. It's software. There's logic behind it, but it works so well, and it just has so much power. It just seems like magic, and certainly not going to delve into the details of that and how it works, but we're just going to kind of use it. And of course, all I love is it mixes really well with Lift, because again, Lift doesn't try to abstract all this stuff from you, that abstract the HTML and the views and all that. It just says, here's your HTML, let's go. So you can certainly put Angular templates and so forth into Lift, and it just mixes really well with it. It has a really nice synergy between the two. And now, LiftNG in particular is a Lift module, as I mentioned, and it defines a Scala DSL for creating Angular backend factory/services, which we will demo today. Also, you can do server pushed events to like emit and broadcast on your scope and root scopes, and you can also do two-way client-server model binding, which is I still feel kind of experimental, but it works, and I'd like to use this in the demo just to kind of show what some of the stuff we're trying to do here, and just get you an idea of where we're kind of headed with this. And so also for this demo, it's going to be I'm not going to go into great detail of what each of these things do. I'm hopeful that most people that watch it are at least somewhat familiar with one of the two, Lift or Angular, and kind of get an idea, help you understand what's going on. So let's build a chat application with this stuff. Now I'm going to show you a little diagram of how it's going to work. We'll have a text box. We'll say hello or whatever in the client browser. That's going to go down by LiftNG facilitate Angular factory to Ajax call. And on the server side, there will be a chat service, which is where we will actually, in the code, we would define that service, and we would do any of the server-side behavior there. And that's going to pass the message over to a chat server. This guy is just a singleton on the server, so anybody that's logged in to the machine or to the web server that sends a chat message, it will come here and it'll aggregate it to a list, and it'll send that list to the chat binder. And the chat binder is, as I mentioned, does the client server model binding. So anytime we send it an update to the model, it'll automatically just send it up to the client through this facilitated binding, and it'll show up in our little bulleted list, just an unordered list. And just a sort of bird's eye view of what it's going to look like. That'll kind of help you follow along. That's what we're going to build. So prerequisites, if you decided to go off and do this yourself, you'll need Java 6 or better, simple build tool installed, and you'll need conscripts/giterate, and that's the thingy that we're going to use to actually generate a sample project that's wired up and ready to go. All of these links are in the show notes, so you can go and do this yourself if you like. So what do you say? Let's go build it. All right, so first things first is we'll come over here and generate the project, as I mentioned. So what we call it is giterate, and we say, hey, go find the project on GitHub at Joski's user account, and it's going to be called LiftNG giterate. And what that does is it'll pull that project in, and it won't initialize Git for you, but it does come in and build a project, and we'll give it a name, and there's going to be several blanks we get to fill out. So I'm going to tell it that I am Joski, because I do own that domain. The package, it kind of guesses a good default. The versions of stuff, don't mess with them. Now I am going to change Lift to 2.6 RC1. And the reason is it's really close to being done, but we're not quite there. The other versions, I think we should be fine. And there you go. Now we have a chat application. And yes, for those of you wondering, I am using Windows. I don't want to get into that, but it works so well we can do it on Windows. Let's just leave it at that. And so now we got that. Let me go crank up IntelliJ to import the project for us, so we can have a nice little environment in which we can develop our code. And what I'll also do is go ahead and start up SBT. And what I'll do is give it the command to run the web container and run it continuously and recompile while any changes are happening to the source files. And while this loads up, we'll be ready to go. So here we go. We got this chat applications and source. The first thing I'll point out is there's some hello world type stuff in here. So I'm opening that you may or may not be able to see based on your screen resolution. And so we'll delete that as we go. And but it's just to kind of demo some of the features of LiftNG when you unpack it. And so we'll look here, and this is what you'll see if you run this demo yourself. Is when you first start up, you'll have this welcome page, and we've got a few little features. So it shows the time when the page loads. You can check the time from the server by clicking this, and you can also toggle this timer that'll just continually push from the server just to demonstrate some of the basic features of LiftNG. But of course, we're going to come in here, open up index page, and rip it all out because we're going to build a chat application. So let's come here, say goodbye to this div, and goodbye to these scripts, and we are ready to roll. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a div in here to contain our Angular application, and so we'll give it a name, and this will tell Angular where our application is inside of the DOM. And I'm going to give us a nice little title here, the ubiquitous chat app. If you've done Lift, you know that we love the chat application as the basic example of demonstrating all the power of Lift. So we're going to do the same here for our module demonstration of LiftNG. All right, so I'll make a controller that tells Angular that we're going to have some stuff going on that we want it to pay attention to, and it gives it a name so it can bind it to code. We'll say this is a chat message, HTML. It's just hard-coded just for us to kind of get a look at things. And also in here, we're going to have an input of type text. Oops. And that's where the user will enter the chat message. We'll also have a button that will send it to the server, and we'll do a quick refresh and show you here's what our application now looks like. And we'll say stuff, and we'll send it to the server. So that's kind of what it looks like. Now I have to wire up some things to make Angular work, and it's real declarative, like I mentioned in the intro. So you can say as input, your model is the variable name chat input, and so we'll be able to manipulate chat input in our JavaScript code in a few moments. And also, furthermore, we'll say, hey, when this gets clicked, call this function. And we're also going to find a function that when it's clicked in Angular, that it will go and perform some action. And of course, it won't do anything yet until we go in here and actually create it. So I'm going to go to my JavaScript, and I'm going to delete the hello world. We don't need that. And so let's come in here and say new JavaScript file. We'll call it LiftChat. All right, let's zoom in so everybody can see. So here we go, Angular module LiftChat. So this right here has got to match the application name that we had earlier. I don't have any dependencies, so that's what the empty list is for. So chat controller, just like we had in our div earlier, and then with that you'll say, here's what I need for this to work. Now, this will get out of the way. We need a scope, and give me that scope when you define this controller. So let's go down here, semicolon, and right, we're in this function. So scope is where all that stuff is defined we were just talking about, like the function we're going to use on send. So let's come in here and say scope on send. So this is we're defining the function that button is going to call. And just for fun, we'll say window alert scope chat input. That we also defined on the got everything wired. Oh, actually, no, I don't. I need to add the script. Now, of course, you would not normally put your scripts here, but this is what we're going to do just for a quick demonstration. So the type, of course, is application JavaScript. Source is JS LiftChat. All right. So with all this in place, we should be able to say hello and see that echoed as a pop-up. Very nice. See it right here. So, okay. So the first thing that should happen, right, is when we submit a message, it should erase it from the text box because it should be done like this. So let's go in and make that change. We'll get rid of our fun little hello window alert. We'll say scope.chat input. You are now an empty string. And we will refresh. And so whatever I type here, when I send, it goes away. Now that'll be the first thing. Now the second thing, of course, we actually need to send this down to the server. So what we're going to have eventually is a chat service. And so here I'll say I now depend on chat services. This is kind of like import if you're used to Java and Scala and things like that. And then we come in here and say, okay, now not only do I want scope as part of my controller, I also want chat service singular. And these, of course, I'm just using, and then we'll go define them in a moment. And then we'll call it chat service or something like that. And once we have that, we'll be able to do what we want to do, which is send it to the server. So, for instance, we might have a function called send chat, and we will send it the chat input. And then, of course, the user doesn't see it anymore. It gets the feeling that the user did, in fact, send the chat down. Okay, well, now we actually build this. So you got to go to the snippet directory of Lyft, where your code lives, because that's where the magic happens. And so what I'm going to say is I want to chat services, spell it correctly. It'll make things easier. It's a Scala object. And let's first do an import that we will need. Let's import some net Lyft modules ng Angular for the Lyft ng library. And what we'll do is whenever chat services is rendered in the DOM, this render function will be called. So let's define what that is going to do. Well, check this out. This is the DSL, good stuff. And it's an Angular module, just like we did earlier, but now we're defining chat services. And it is just like we would write in our JavaScript. So then, for those of you who are comfortable with Angular, the next thing you would want to do is say, I want a factory, and let's call it chat service. So here, again, we're matching chat service and chat services. And in here, we got JSON object factory. There's a little bit of boilerplate we need to make an object. And maybe in future versions we'll give it a better name, but it works for now. JSON call is a little bit of a misnomer. The idea is it's going to return JSON, even though in our particular case we don't need it. And here we'll make a send chat. So basically, this is going to correlate to the function that we're creating here. But instead of defining it in JavaScript, we're actually defining it here on the server, send chat, which will take a string. We'll call it message. And it will be this little function here that will return nothing. We'll return empty, which is part of the Lyft standard library. Similar to Scala's option, this is analogous to the none. And so what we're saying is, yeah, this doesn't return anything, right? Because the chat's just going to send it down to the server. We're not sending anything in response to that particular call. And just for good measure, we'll print this out so you can see it and be somewhat convinced that the code is actually working. So one unfortunate thing about using Windows is the SBT has got to be restarted. There's a bug I need to actually track down and report to the plugin author, but I just haven't had time to do that. And so now that I've got that hooked up, we're running again. Let's refresh. And let's see if I did forget something. Once again, I got to add that script. So I wrote the code, but I didn't actually add it to my DOM. So now we're going to have a script. I don't care about the type, because what I'm going to say, hey, Lyft. That's what data Lyft will do. Is data is a valid attribute in HTML5, so any browser and stuff will ignore this. But when when Lyft comes and parses this, it'll say, oh, look, it wants me to do something, and I'm going to tell it, go get chat services. And it'll look in that snippets directory and find the code that we just wrote, and it'll render this right here in code for tossing up to the client. So let me refresh again. Hopefully this will go to the server. All right, so it blanked it out. That's a good sign. And sure enough, if you can see my screen down here at the bottom, it echoed server. So we are hooked up to the back end, no problem, right? And but what actually we'll need to do this is send it over to the chat server that we talked about earlier. So let's go ahead and start building that. So this time you have to go to the comment directory, and well, not for the chat server, but we'll have other actors we're going to put there. So we'll just say chat actors will be the name of my file. I won't actually call anything that. So let me wipe out this stuff and say get some imports that we're going to need. So lift web. We're going to need actor because we're going to use lifts actors to do this. And we're also going to do some HTTP comment stuff, so we're going to import that. So let's go define our chat server. Chat server, what makes it a singleton. Object doesn't mean singleton necessarily, but that's a discussion for another time. Extends lift actor with listener manager. All right, so we'll come in here. Now you see there's a red underline because I need to override the create update, and we'll talk about that momentarily and what it means. But for now, I can just put a string in there to make it happy. And so that's kind of a stub now for my chat server. And let's go ahead and send that over. So we'll say chat server, import it, send it the message. So bang is an operator for actors. We kind of took it from Erlang. It'll send message over to the chat server, and we'll process it over there in a few moments. But for now, let's start thinking about what we want to happen on the client, because I've sent one message, but what we really want is a list, right? If we go back to the DOM, I have this unordered list here. And so what's going to ultimately happen is that a list of strings is going to show up in our UI. And what we need to do then is go back to the Angular world and say ng repeat. And for every message that is in chat.messages, print or create a list item, and in there we're going to put the string, or sorry, the object message. And again, I'm kind of ahead, so what I'm going to do now is I need this to happen inside the JavaScript. Now, just again to kind of show what's going on, I'll make something just quick and dirty for fun. And so the idea is that if there is this object called chat inside the scope, and it has a field called messages, and we'll just put some strings in here, 1, 2, who cares, 2, Angular, whatever. And that now, what this will allow us to do is actually go and do an ng repeat on chat.messages, which is we have here. And so for each string that's in there, it's going to have a list item created for it, and it's going to show up in the UI. So let's go and refresh and see if I've got it hooked up right. And there you go, 1, 2, Angular. And but what the cool thing is that we're going to do here is that we're going to bind from the server side. So what I've done here is done it from the client, right? This is some client-side code, but who cares about that junk? That's just for looks, so you understand what's kind of going on. What I'm actually going to do is come in here. First, I need to make a case class called chat messages. So this is sort of like the chat that we just had. So there's this list of string. So I'll have an object, and it has a field called messages. So it's going to match by name what you saw in the in the ng repeat right here. So I'm going to name it chat, and then name the instance of that class chat, and it's going to have messages. And it will default to empty lists for convenience. Big thing here is you need to extend ng model if you do this. It's Angular. It's part of lift ng, and it's something I would like to get rid of, but for now, that's kind of how it works. So let's go and make a chat binder. Now this is the guy that I was talking about that's going to do the binding that from client server that's really, really powerful, and so powerful that I'm calling it experimental because I'm scared of it. So here we go. It's going to bind to chat just like we had earlier and that I removed moments ago. So it's going to bind to that right there in the scope. And what we're going to give it an initial value. Let's break this up so it's easy for everyone to read. So the initial value will be chat messages, and let's just make a list of, something like from Scala. And again, that's just to kind of just show you guys like how I've got it hooked up, so kind of understand what's going on. So as before, I need to actually put this into the DOM somewhere so that Lyft can add it. And so I'll go up here to where we define the controller, because I want it inside my scope of the controller. And what I'll say is data lift again. Hey data, hey Lyft, pay attention to this right here. go find Angular and tell it to bind my chat binder. Let me put this on a new line so it's a little more readable. And so this is a lift-in-G, telling it to do a bind, the type chat binder, because we made a class called chat binder right there. And that is all you've got to do to hook this guy up to your UI. So, oh yeah, once again, I'm in Windows, so let's go exit, re-enter. And what you're going to see is that from Scala message, assuming I hadn't screwed up anything, from Scala. So now we are bound from client to server. Very cool, huh? So let's just go finish our chat server and we'll be done. So what I'm going to do is a private var messages, because I don't have a legit database, so we got to use a variable. I know it's ugly, but hey, this thing's a hack anyway. And so I got my create update. So what happens here is anytime a new listener to the chat server is created or needs an update, it'll send it this message. So I'm going to say, hey, send it chat message of my current state messages, which is this variable right here. And chat message is just going to wrap it up. One thing about using lift-in-G, you got to wrap stuff up. So it'll have a case class that knows how to serialize and deserialize. And here's where we actually handle the message coming in. It's a method called low priority, and say anytime I get what I'll call a message, it's a type string. This is what I want to do. I'm going to go to messages, append to the end of the list the new message, and update my listeners. And when the update listener is called, this create update is called, and chat messages get sent. So we first update it with the new message and update the listeners that way. Now, a couple things we want to do here. I want to make these distinct, remove any duplicates. And the reason is, if you're familiar with Angular, if you do an ng repeat and it has the same object in there twice, it kind of goes belly up. It's not made to handle that, so we'll take care of that. We also don't want to collect messages forever, so we'll only take the right 10 messages. So we'll fill up once we hit 10, and it's only going to be the 10 most recent that we keep up with. And so that right there will kind of keep us from having like this infinite list of messages. And let's see, so let's get rid of our initial chat messages that we had, and let's add comment listener. So what I want to do is just saying this is a comment actor. I want to listen to another actor, in particular the chat server. And really all you got to do is this right here, def register with chat server, and you're done. All right, make sure everybody's happy, looks good, and now we should be able to go let it finish compiling. Restart the app server container. All right, and control F5 to refresh, and hopefully it works, and it sure does. Another chat. So sure enough, you see it going from here all the way, full round trip. And the cool thing is, it's legit. It really is working. So let's do, over here, I've got Internet Explorer. And if you can believe it, it's actually doing Internet Explorer even IE, and it's IE9. Doesn't suck with lift-in-G. Right there it is, right there it is. That should make you feel really good about using lift-in-G. That's more to do with the way Lift works, and of course all the great work that has been done in Angular to make sure that it's cross-browser compatible. One other thing that's worth mentioning is that I talked about security, so just really quick, you can't just throw in a script here and say, what we're going to do, window alert, I hacks you. And so I didn't do anything to make sure that I escaped things, such as a script like this couldn't be injected and so forth. And that's just because this nice synergy that we have with these frameworks, that we're making sure that kind of crap can't happen to you. So there you have it. It took me about 18 minutes, so I went over a little bit. It's just a challenge I put up to myself to get it down to 15, and I still haven't hit it. And so it's a quick and dirty way you can get started with LiftNG if you're curious, and I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to create this and make the video as well. And so I hope that you get a chance to play with it sometime yourself and give me some feedback in the comments below or find me on Twitter and just let me know what you think. And be on the lookout for a longer version. I plan on doing a demo that takes closer to an hour and a half. I'll actually try to explain Lift and Angular a little bit better and also show all three features of LiftNG. And that will be probably soon. It's just a practice I need to run through for a talk I'm giving next in December. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and please get in touch with us and let me know what you think.